My last instance, ladies and gentlemen, is rights talk and moral citizenship. Rights and rights talk serve a further important function. They can confer the dignity of moral citizenship. Moral citizenship is a person's sense that he or she is a fully entitled member of society, undisqualified from enjoyment of its privileges and opportunities by any feature of his or her humanhood. It does not consist in mere freedom from criminal penalties and other legal burdens, but it is something richer, subtler, and perhaps deeper. It is a state of mind produced by the absence of criminal penalties and legal burdens. It is the sense of non-disqualification, of non-exclusion, and of positive entitlement that freedom from disqualification and from official sanction engender. If that seems impossibly abstract, let me recount to you my first experience of the heady sense of moral citizenship. It was Saturday, 13 October 1990 in Johannesburg. I was among a small band of marchers who set out on the first Gay Pride March on African soil. It was just 8 months after the apartheid government had agreed to negotiate towards democracy. The atmosphere of repression was still intense, but possibility was richly alive. And after some nail-biting ups and downs, we had obtained official sanction for our march. We made our way through a busy urban district, but had to cross a main artery leading from the city. It was 12 noon, and Saturday traffic was at a peak. As we reached the intersection, we saw an extraordinary sight. The police, assisted by municipal traffic officials, had cordoned off the crossing. Police vehicles with flashing lights barred the phalanx of vehicles to enable our small band, with banners and festive outfits, to march across the road. The business of Africa's biggest city was brought to a halt, while we clamantly asserted our entitlement to full citizenship in a future democratic South Africa. It was for me a moment of exhilarated insight, and it has never entirely left me. I had grown up knowing that I was gay in a society that despised same-sex orientation as a dangerous and unseemly perversion, and that suppressed and punished its expression. I felt deep shame at my feelings and desires, but worse, I felt shame at what I was, a homosexual. I deplored not being heterosexual, with the comfortable conformity, acceptance, and career and family benefits I thought that this entailed. I lacked moral citizenship in a society that would confer it on me only to the extent that I could pretend that I was straight. That the apartheid police could subdue the arterial flow of Africa's biggest city, even if only for a few minutes, to create passage for a demonstration for gay and lesbian equality, offered to me a glimpse of what moral citizenship could entail. And much of the Constitutional Court's achievement since 1994 has consisted in this somewhat intangible process of asserting the moral citizenship of all South Africa's inhabitants. This has been especially significant in a society that under apartheid owed its very existence to the processes of definition out, of exclusion, division, subordination, and condemnation. In declaring the death penalty unconstitutional, the court affirmed that the very core of constitutionalism is to protect the rights of minorities and others who cannot do so through the democratic process, even the worst and the weakest. Some of the court's strongest decisions have aimed at reversing women's subordination in society, in other words, in undoing women's legal disabilities as well as their moral disqualification from full citizenship. And the court has expanded the boundaries of legal claims to make it easier for women to gain recompense for violent attack. In a country pulsing with xenophobic tensions, the court has confirmed that non-citizens illegally in the country can benefit from constitutional rights and deserve its protection. It has voided a regulation prohibiting foreign teachers from finding permanent employment in state schools. and it has found that non-citizens with permanent residence are entitled to claim social security benefits. In this task, the court is attentive even to the power of language in creating exclusion. Recently, in granting an order that declared a city-ordered eviction unlawful, it deplored the city's and the High Court's description of the occupiers as invaders. This, it said, detracts from the humanity of the respondents, is emotive and judgmental, and comes close to criminalizing them. On a continent and in a world in which difference has all too often led to destruction and bloodshed, perhaps the court's most persistent theme has been to assert the inclusive moral citizenship of constitutionalism. Its most vivid jurisprudence here has been in response to litigation by gay and lesbian activist groups. In a series of far-going decisions, the court has spelt out the meaning of constitutional equality and protection from discrimination for gays and lesbians. Its judgments culminated a few years ago in an order that gave the legislature 1 year to give full marriage equality. It is rightly pointed out that hate-filled attitudes and discrimination against gays and lesbians are still rife in my country. Lesbians in particular are sometimes targeted in violent attacks. Lesbians living in townships are especially vulnerable, for horrific rapes and murders have occurred there. The question that arises is this: what does it mean when a marginalized group, which for long centuries has suffered persecution and violence and oppression, is invested with full constitutional protection and equal rights? It does not mean everything, for by themselves, rights consist only in words. They cannot be eaten, and they cannot afford a shield against hatred and ignorance. But it also does not mean nothing. Lesbians and gays, like many others, continue to suffer injustice and oppression in South Africa. The path to non-discrimination and full inclusion still stretches long ahead. But much has been achieved. For nearly 18 years, gays and lesbians have enjoyed status as full moral citizens in South Africa, in a continent that elsewhere still treats their orientation with brutal and often murderous oppression. Not only have legal burdens been abolished, but inclusive protections have been enacted. Within the country, there's also fairly widespread acceptance that gays and lesbians are integral to the project of constitutionalism. This was strikingly asserted a few years ago when Mr. Jacob Zuma, then a presidential aspirant, appeared to make derogatory comments about gays and lesbians after the Constitutional Court's marriage ruling. One of his key allies, the then leader of the ANC Youth League, Mr. Fikile Mbalula, demanded that he apologize for his remarks. This was necessary, Mr. Mbalula said, because gay rights are human rights, and that is what makes our Constitution the most progressive in the world. And Mr. Zuma did apologize. He issued a statement apologizing unreservedly for the pain and anger his statements may have caused, and affirming his commitment to constitutional protection for sexual orientation. This was quite extraordinary. It illustrated the social power of rights talk. For what was at issue here was an idea: the notion that gays and lesbians are entitled to full moral citizenship under a constitution worth preserving, and to whose benefits they are equally entitled. That idea prevailed, and its triumph secured a victory for constitutionalism itself. Let me be precise about what I'm saying. It is that even when their realization is only partial, law and legal rights confer civic dignity, a perception of personhood, and a sense of moral agency on their beneficiaries. Despite grinding poverty and continuing dispossession and discrimination, the sense of moral citizenship and of civic dignity is widely disseminated amongst all South Africans. This internalized sense of constitutional agency is one of the most beneficial products of our Constitution. What the Constitution has conferred on all South Africa's inhabitants is a sense of themselves as bearers of constitutional rights, rather than just as legal subjects. This is not the same as material substance of equal protection and legal benefit. It is something different, but also precious. Indeed, in a world that too often mocks the dignity of humans and undermines their social agency, it is in itself a significant achievement.